Catus Maximus here, this time with a review of the GM PowerTorque High Torque Impact Universal Swivel sockets, or they're not sockets, universal swivel joints. And these, they have both traditional styles, such as standard pin drive style like these, and then they have these. And so I kind of decided to pick these up and do a review just on these alone, because they have this hex drive style, and we'll show you right here, where they have this this bottom part's like a socket, and then the top part has a rounded hex, just like one of these right here, just like one of these ball end hex. And then they have a retaining ring inside that holds them. One other feature about these is that they will insert, or they can lock into place. So you can push them in and then they'll lock into place, and they'll just act like a small extension. And then they can be pulled out, and they have a little snap ring inside to try to hold them in when they're in the inserted position. And then you can pull them out, and then they work like a traditional impact socket. They also have some pretty nice and sturdy ball dentants on them, and I did appreciate that. However, I do have some issues with these. So these are neat to add to for set building in certain kinds of situations. But generally speaking, they're not a replacement for a traditional pin drive impact universal joint. Now, one of the issues is if we can look real close, you can see it's a carbon finish, but it's just not the most robust. It's really kind of chunky and coarse. And that's something to point out, because we can take a look at a variety of things here. Gray's Pneumatic, old Craftsman impact. We've got a gear wrench, and we can see that, you know, a nice industrial finish will be smooth. So that's one point I wanted to make. Another point that I wanted to make was this, specifically this drive style here. So these are high torque, and as compared like to this 3/8 to a traditional pin drive style, I believe that this would ultimately fail or take more torque before failing, all things being equal materials, so on, than a traditional pin drive. And someday when I have enough money to do that, I'd like to do some tests against this style versus traditional ones. However, it has a variety of other issues. One is longevity. Since you have a ball and a socket there, grit will want to run back and forth over itself when they get dirty. So it'll be, you know, impacting exhaust studs. A bunch of rust and road grit will get in there. And then as it rolls around, that road grit will get sucked into the socket and then act as a grinding paste. And that's just totally undeniable. Some of it, you know, as it articulates, will kind of work itself out. But it's nowhere near the same as a pin drive, where if crud gets into that hole, when it comes around, the pin kind of squishes it out and it just wants to fall out. And since the force is being applied to the sidewalls of the slot here, and turn that around this way, it wants to scrape all the dirt out of the slot and force it to the end, so it's not sitting there just being run over and over and over again. The outside of the socket's just to help, or on these, is just to help maintain alignment, but all the force is being applied through that cross pin, which leads these to operate very smoothly, which is another criticism I have of these, is that they just don't operate very smoothly. Because of that hex, they're just a little chunky. I'll show you what I mean with a ball end and a socket. This is exactly what's inside those. And because you have a hex, as you build up a little bit of tension, it kind of wants to, what's known as cogging. You get a little bit of resistance at each of the peaks as it goes by. And this also helps exemplify how it's just sitting there in a pocket, so grit just really wants to get trapped in there. And the third issue would be, of course, that the nature of that in the ring. I did a review on these, and now I fiddle with this more. Really, they are really a lot of tension. That's the easiest way to say it. They're not just a cogging, but unless you're kind of pushing on them, and even when you are, they're really just not very smooth operating. And under normal conditions, the corners here and the way they grind against that ring in there really makes them, and as soon as that corner hits like the gap in the ring, they kind of want to jam up. They're just not smooth operating at all, and that's frustrating. And the final issue I have is with this nature of them going in and out. So I kind of like that effect. being dual purpose, I actually have some wobble extensions. So wobble extensions have this weird cutout, so you get a little bit of deflection. And you can see there's a slight difference between these two. One's a standard, and one has a little shelf, a little turned down section. So a standard one just goes on, you get a little bit of wobble. With this extension is the same idea, where you can use it as a normal wobble, like this, or you can push it in, and it'll lock the socket straight. And that can be handy in some situations, but ultimately, and I'll demonstrate with this 1/4 inch and a spinner handle, and additionally, on the 1/4 inch, it's a really tough dentant, and so when you put on a socket and it pushes in, half the time the socket comes off, or it comes off the wrench when you're trying to pull it back out, which is a little bit annoying because you got to fiddle with putting it back on. And when you're using this, say you're using it on a fastener and you're pressing with quite a bit of force. Let me zoom out a little bit here. And you're pressing with a lot of force, and you wobble, it kind of gets locked, and then it's like your hands jamming against whatever you're using the wobble to clear in the first place, and then you have to kind of yank it and pull it back out. And so as you're actually working, it frustratingly, pops back into place, and ends up slowing you down, and eventually you pull it off and go get a normal universal socket. And here's an example of it working with the standard pin drive, because when you use these, due to their nature, they're really smooth. It's just totally smooth work operating them when you're pushing, whether you're using light tension, whether you're not holding the handle very good. They just work great. They really do. That is pretty much the best design. That wheel has been invented as far as driving impact sockets. This is the way these operate is just unbelievable. And when you in a situation like this with a spinner handle, it's exactly what you expect. The socket just stays on the fastener, and you can wobble around and get it out real fast. And of course, all this would be compared to standard universal joints, which work pretty well. They can go in steeper angles, but when you really get to forcing them, they kind of want to jam and fold up on themselves. So that's why impact ones are really great for hand tool use. We'll do a quick little comparison of these PowerTorques to some more common brands. Here's a Gray's pneumatic. The Gray's pneumatic's a little taller. I don't know why, but they put a long stem on their 1/4 inch impact universals. So it is shorter when it's compressed, and about the same height. Still a little bit shorter when it's extended. We'll compare the 3/8. This is an inverted style. Sometimes they make them backwards, essentially, than what a standard one is. And we can see that compared to a 3/8, it is a bit taller on the body. It's shorter when compressed, and of course longer, but not by much, but a little bit longer than the standard pin drives. And the same would go for the 1/2 inch. We're going to give a nice detailed look at these this time. All about the same, except for the 1/2 inch seems to be quite a bit taller. That's actually interesting. They all scale pretty well in height, but when you get to the 1/2 inch, it's really a whole bunch taller. It's as tall as the rest of this Powerbuilt and this Craftsman are in the compressed. And when it's extended, and the 1/2 inch has a really tough spring. The socket, it's almost guaranteed to come off when you try to pull it out. It's way taller when it's extended, so that's kind of interesting. And of course, out of all these, I always like to bring out something large, like a 3/4 inch, which of course will dwarf all these. So if you're ever doing real heavy-duty work with universals, standard or impact, always use the largest one possible, because when you're now operating at an angle, you're causing forces, bending forces, to be induced, and it's real easy to break any type. So always, instead of going for the 1/4 inch, if you can fit a 3/8, do it. And if you can use a 3/4 inch on like a heavy suspension bolt, do it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this overly detailed review of these PowerTorque impact universal joints. Really appreciate you watching. Please subscribe. Catus Maximus out.